right, welcome to the May 11th, 2022 Shellfish Advisory Committee meeting. People are still coming in the waiting room and in the building, but I will read our diversity statement to start. The Shellfish Advisory Committee is committed to providing an environment of respect during meetings. We ask that all members to interact in a polite manner, even when there is disagreement. We value the participation of our community and want all participants, including marginalized and minoritized communities, to feel welcome and respected. We ask our committee members and all who participate to commit to these standards to support and respect our community. So first on the agenda, we have meeting minutes to approve. It was March and April. Any comments?
They appear to be very complete.
Okay.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, they were.
So motion to accept as. Submitted.
Submitted second. Adam, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, awesome. Next, I don't know if anyone's here for recreational shellfish closure. So I just wanted to move that we discuss that first, just because there is no update. I don't want, if someone's here for recreational, I don't want you to have to sit through a regulation review that you may not be interested in. So, we have to make a motion to move it, don't we? Or
No,
not?
I think you could just do it.
All right, I think we can just, I'll go, we can just do it. So, we asked, DMF for updates and did not get an update, and I happened to see Jeff today and, at the duck briefing this morning, and he said no updates. They said they were still on schedule, but that there were no updates to date. So hopefully we will have an update on the next meeting.
You're still planning to come down, right? What do you mean?
So for the
Site survey.
recreational, no, this is for recreational. So they're still planning to have information on the flow, hydrographic, all that information by late June, and would probably have information for us in July.
The one thing is Alicia?
Yeah, she's
She's
second life,
Perfect.
back in check her afterwards, yeah. Oh, and I do, on the minutes, if I can go just one thing on the minutes, we'll catch up by next week. I know we're behind, but we'll catch up by next week. Alicia is going to these and last times for next meeting.
Sure.
Okay, so on to the aquaculture, or actually I should say, are there any questions on the recreation, questions about no update? Of course you've got a question.
No, you said that they're on schedule and that June they'll have more information on the flow out there, and then July they'll have a report. Will that be concerning whether what will they know at that point?
That's a great question. I don't think they know what they'll know. But I see those dates and really hopeful of aligning with when we open in the fall.
If we open in the fall.
I'm saying when.
Okay.
No, I don't know. I'm like, again, I said hope.
When and what? I mean,
When and
what.
When and
When-
South River.
When, what, and where.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we continue to push and hope for an update next month. Any other questions on the online? I don't see any. Okay. All right, now on to the main event here, the aquaculture regulations. So we have our regulations that were approved by the select board on December 3rd, 2019, if you believe it. And I think it was actually 12:30 at night, that's why it was December 3rd. It was actually a December 2nd meeting that we went on past midnight. And these were approved. There's been a lot of transition at DMF. And there's also been two plus years of other communities having aquaculture, so lessons learned throughout. And DMF, the new Chrissy, who took whose place did she?
Chris Gillespie.
Chris Galacci's place. She reviewed the regulations and offered us some comments. So what I thought I could do was share my screen here. And we can go over these. So I will post these. What I did, I can start by saying what I did. We have regulations that are posted on our website. I have the Word version of that, and what we did was add edits, right? I talked to Chrissy on the phone and she gave me suggestions and added the suggestions. I will also say I changed Board of Selectmen to Select Board, so that I don't think we need to have a much discussion on. So a lot of the red is that. So I will skip over the changing of Board of Selectmen to Select Board and go through these suggestions. And I can explain them as best I can from their comments. I think they're pretty straightforward. And I think they had some good suggestions. So let me start in the definition section. Aquaculture, the suggestion was to change the rearing of shellfish to the rearing of shellfish. It was the rearing of aquatic animals, and they do not, it's only shellfish that they regulate, so not fish or other
Seahorses.
or homies or whatever else. So it's specific, it makes sense to me. Does anybody have any, okay, I mean, we kind of have to go through these, I know some of these are gonna, the license area, they suggested that we add and define by latitude and longitude coordinates submitted with the application. Again, more specific,
Don't we,
we were doing that anyway,
like for the application, don't we?
the application to DMF.
Oh, to DMF.
Yeah.
Alright, so not the application, that's gonna,
Yeah.
don't we assign that?
Yeah, we assign it,
Okay.
but the application to DMF,
Okay.
yes. Okay, licensing authority.
Can we maybe put in the DMF application to make that
There,
clear, that it's a separate,
license area.
Yes,
With the DMF application.
yep, over the DMF application. Okay. All right, this,
For anybody who doesn't know what DMF is, maybe we write it down.
yeah, so maybe, that's probably the first time it's stated, isn't it?
we could just do a definition of DMF.
It's in there, I just need to go back and make this one the first one. Okay. Okay, great suggestion, Alan. Again, another select board, on to page 2, the only change is BOS to select board, which I don't see that they're, using acronyms, so I just kept select, BOS also got changed to select board. So the next comment is 4.3, application process, 4.3C, no license shall cover an area greater than 2 acres. Acres do not need to be contiguous, but DMF wanted this language, non-contiguous sites require separate licenses.
Now, is that the
That's our DMF rule,
license?
that is a DMF rule, yes.
So if we issue somebody 2 acres and they're not contiguous, they have to fill out 2 separate applications.
With DMF.
Even if they're within the pilot project parcel, or is this
Yes,
envisioning greater Scituate waters?
it would be both, it would be either, sorry, yes, either.
Yeah, one in Cambridge, one in South River.
Yep. again, just being more specific on something we would have had to do anyway. Am I going too fast? Does anyone in the public have comments on these? How about just raise your hand if you do? If we get to one, we don't have many
You know what,
people
maybe it's a
here.
benefit to them if you could increase this view, if you wanna be able to read it.
Okay. Do you
That would
want to
be
be in?
helpful,
Yeah, I mean, make it really big.
I actually do have a question.
Go
Hi, Jenkins Cagman, 180 Boothville Road. So this is with respect to, this is a question. Is this with respect to the future application process, if the pilot program were to be successful? This is not with respect to those who applied to the pilot program, right? That was a totally separate.
This is with respect to all aquaculture in Scituate, including any sort of new program we did for 2 years or a long-standing program. I do wanna note, because I did address this later, that DMF does not want us to call it a pilot because a license is a license for them. Like, there is no pilot license, and when you start talking about pilot programs, they start talking about, kind of research stuff where you can't sell.
We can call it within internally.
We can, our board,
When you're
our select
applying
board
to
loves the language, I just don't think we should put it in the regulations.
Right,
So we're new to the town and I've been following and reading,
Okay.
and I was one of the ones that emailed to ask if you were still accepting applications merely as an inquiry.
Right.
You realize now it's sort of those who applied have been selected.
Yeah.
That's totally fine.
not selected,
Or
ranked.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for all these clarifications. And I understood it to be a pilot program that would then determine if it's viable and it would be successful in the future. Is that what?
That's
But
what
it's
our,
not called a pilot program.
yeah, that's what our select board envisioned.
thank
From
you.
Like,
the
we will
perspective of
qualify-
the board, it's
Understood. Thank
From the state's
Not
point of
many.
view, it sounds like we can issue a 2-year pilot license, right? You still need to get a license from the state, and so they don't care whether it's a pilot or not.
Right, and we can decide, Scituate can then decide not to do it anymore.
Thank you.
But it being a pilot program was really about protecting the brand name of Scituate oysters or Scituate shellfish. So if it doesn't work out, Scituate won't be issuing local licenses for their waters.
It's gonna work out.
They will grow.
They will grow,
Yeah. They'll see the one in the harbor.
yeah. Okay, so
Page 6.
did that answer your, thank you for participating. Okay, 4.5, application review, license granting, down 4.5 G. Again, they wanted us to add the word seaward. So licenses shall only be issued for land more than 150 feet seaward from the mean high water line.
Oh.
I'm just saying,
Please.
that's where we were going anyway, but. And then, so for K, within 1 year of approval of the license and DMF certification, the applicant shall complete the application review process as required by federal, state. And the reason they added and DMF certification, they wanted to make sure that we didn't crunch the time, compress the time, yeah, better.
Is the DMF calling it a license or are they calling it a certificate?
Well, they call it a license, but they certify the site. So that's their language that they use.
And they won't be pre-certified, you said.
They're going to be pre-certified, but they thought in the future that this would not compress. Okay, more select board.
6. Nothing.
Nothing, I told you, there's not, top of page 7, typo, it should have been 4.5, not 4.6. I can't believe they found a typo in all of this, because we went through it so many times.
I see a typo in the next one. 5.4. LGST.
Oh, I did that typo, sorry, LG. Okay, so they wanted just add the acronym right after it. Again, those were not big comments, there are a couple bigger comments toward the end. Okay, all right.
Here's where we talk about the pre-qualified list.
Yeah, so annual report is the next comment. Again, it was just the language. Investment in production, where,
Can I ask a question before we move on? Again, I wasn't involved, I wasn't the
yeah,
liaison when these were being ironed out, and you guys are spending all this time. 6.1E, where you talk about failure of light sea to meet specified production level for any 3 consecutive years may result in the forfeiture of the agricultural license and licensed area. I'd just like to know the history of 3 years of not producing a minimum amount, which I think is what we have. That seemed like a long time to me. I mean, if this is approved and all that, so it can't go backwards. But 3 years seems like a lot. The guy just sitting there, put $10,000 in covering that cost,
yeah,
buying it, whatever, for $10,000, but not producing any,
Well, the
yeah.
first 18 months.
is nothing, right?
Yeah, the
So-
first,
But
We
once you
didn't
get
wanna-
beyond that though, once you're past that initial 2 or 3 years, your point makes
You're
more
right.
sense.
Yeah,
I think one thing was that, that's, for all the 6, 7, or 8 different towns, rules and regulations, Plymouth,
yeah,
Provincetown, Truro, Barnstable, Duxbury, Wellfleet, that was the typical
3 years
number,
of
3
not
years.
production.
And I mean, you have to give the farmers some leeway, because what if there's like a death, what if there's something major that prevents you from doing something for maybe a year,
yeah, Which-
yeah.
It still may result.
yeah, that's why we use the term
Yeah.
may.
I mean, it could have
Yeah.
been 2 when you said may, but 3, again,
Yeah.
we want to protect a non-producing,
We do, it was kind of a balance.
pre-approved, all right, I mean, it's a done deal, I understand.
It was a balance with agreed to start up, it was 3 years, but once you get going, it probably.
And these can be revised.
They can be,
They could, I think we also didn't want, we wanted it to be, them to be used, right? You don't
Yeah.
want people to sit on acres.
No, and that's why the investment's required and the minimum
Yeah.
production.
Correct. Okay, now this is a larger comment, the 7.0 non-commercial aquaculture research and education projects. So they're suggesting we strike all the language because non-commercial aquaculture research education projects are not eligible for Section 57 licenses. Individuals or organizations interested in aquaculture research and education projects shall work with the Shellfish Advisory Committee, the licensing authority, and DMF to obtain a scientific permit. So we would still have this set aside of acreage, but it would be through a scientific permit. And the scientific permits are different from the commercial aquaculture licenses because the scientific permits are time limited and so usually there's a clear project they're doing and a timeline. Not to say that they could be researching something for 2 years and ask for an extension and do it 3 years. Not to say that, but it's not something that somebody gets for a long period of
And
time.
it seems like you're taking out all the language with regard to fee and yearly and saying, just work it out with us and the Shellfish Advisory Committee, and we'll issue the.
And DMF will issue the permit. It still goes through DMF, it's just called a scientific permit, it is not called, and I'm actually surprised they didn't catch this the first time.
Did they change this internally, their process, or?
They
Because
might
this was
have.
literally ripped right from
Yeah, I
everyone
know.
else's regulations.
I think they
It looked
might
the same on every other one.
That's a good question, Jamie. I think they might have changed their process. But
Nothing to talk about there,
I mean-
they required that.
yeah, I mean, nothing. So here we go, rights granted under a license. This I will explain. They're suggesting we cross out unless otherwise conditioned, a license shall authorize all these things. Because licenses don't always authorize everything below. So they're suggesting a license can authorize the licensee at all times of the year to do for the following. And the reason is number 4 is a special authorization, that has to be written out. Mulch.
applied for. That's if you wanna try your hand at, not purchasing seed from a nursery or hatchery, but, doing it yourself. In the water column. I don't think that we'd be able to where we are, that's usually only done in like, bays like Wellfleet or Duxbury. I think that there's too much water flow that you would never get spat to collect on the surface such that you could make a living at it. I think your farmers are always going to have to purchase their seed from a nursery. You could try it.
Yeah, but I mean, if you were to try it, you'd
You'd
have
have
to
to
get
apply
a,
for it,
you'd
yeah.
have to get a specific.
It's like an endorsement.
It's almost like a towing endorsement on a
Yeah.
captain's license, right? You have to have that specific endorsement almost to be able to do that. And they thought that our regulations left it open. And again, we took this from another town, and this is a problem they've been having, is that people have been doing it without getting a license, so they.
Guerrilla style.
Yeah, so they've had to crack
I
down.
wonder why they're, I mean, why would they care where this stuff is hatched?
Probably like a black market seed selling. I mean, you can't sell seed between farmers unless you've asked the Division of Marine Fisheries if you can. Because you're taking shellfish from one body of water and placing it in another body of water, diseases can be, transmitted that way, so they really take it seriously.
Yeah, possibly. Okay, designated aquaculture flow area, our favorite section.
I have a big question before you get into this. I thought we would now allow them for us.
Well, I have it in there. These are for the entire, these regulations are for the entire town of Scituate, every body of water in
Right.
Scituate.
And for the pilot program, we said no flows.
Right, I wrote it, but,
This
we're
is
gonna.
probably the 15th time that's been brought up.
Yeah, I mean,
The 50th
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And even so, again, I still disagree with it. I can't believe the selectmen even approved it, thinking that, because it's up to the harbor master to give that approval for the float applications. And he could say, all right, you can all have them, or nobody can have them. It seems
Yeah.
very, anyways, it's water under the bridge, it wasn't water.
Okay, yeah, so 8.1A1, they are suggesting designated aquaculture flow areas shall be approved by the harbor master and shall be located on a licensed site and approved by the DNF for aquaculture related activity only. So that was something that they wanted specificity, that if there was ever floats, they have to be located in connection with a licensed site.
And within
Yes. Not that, and then if we go to what we voted on the last time, which was floats, barges, and docks are prohibited on aquaculture sites for the pilot program. I think we need a different language, not pilot program, because obviously
To the location,
for
outer Cohasset Harbor.
the outer
the
Grace
initial,
Harbor.
the initial. Well, that puts it in the rules forever. In other words, you say pilot program, then it's okay. If 10 years down the road, it works great, we work it out with Cohasset, and there's 5 farmers there, and
They're never gonna wanna see floats there,
Yeah.
as much as I'd love to see it.
they
Even though they look
they
really
being
quite
Cohasset,
respectable in Duxbury. I mean,
they being Cohasset,
They're cute.
we could allow. If we allow it, here we're saying it's prohibited. If we take out pilot program, we're saying by definition, it's prohibited forever, if you say the spot.
We could call it the initial,
Why do you want to take out
the initial,
Or
can we
give
call
it-
it the initial?
And give it a geographical
Yeah, that's what
location.
Jamie's talking about.
How about floats, barges, and docks are prohibited on aquaculture sites for the initial Briggs Harbor program? Is that narrow enough?
No.
Okay.
Not exclusive of, but that's what we're doing.
Susan, we are moving through these.
I told you, we're gonna, what
Yeah,
time's
you're right.
that game you need to get to?
First quarter, man.
Yeah.
First, you're gonna miss the first quarter. I told you these were like pretty, Paula, did you have any comments?
You muted,
Oh, shoot, do I?
you're muted, Paula.
Okay, how's that? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep,
Yeah, I'm going back to the initial Briggs Harbor program. So we can't use the word pilot, is that correct?
well, they would not, DMF would not like us to use the term pilot in the regulations.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That sounds fine then. I just thought pilot seemed better because that is really, as we know.
That's what it is.
But if we can't use that, initial is perfect.
Okay. All right, more board, select board, select board, select board. Type out little a, big A. So this, H was taken out, yes, sorry, sorry, 8.1. 8.1H was taken out, and it was on a version prior to the one that was approved. And the reason DMF thinks it should be back in there is because because we have different sections, we have our aquaculture section, and then there's a separate section for designated float areas. And they want to be clear that designated float areas go under the same process too. So after granting a float licenses from the select board, they shall request DMS certification on the issuance of a license, which may include a site survey application and conditions of review. DMF shall issue a notice either approving or denying the license. DMF may also request additional information or set conditions on the license. Again, they want to
So
be
this is
clear that
after
it
they
goes
apply
back
to
to
the
them.
town, the harbor says, yes, you can have that float in that spot, and they apply to the state.
Yeah, I mean, it's just facts. It's a process. It's a very, yes.
Job security is what it is.
It really is.
Yeah. I don't need this
Big
kind of job
brother.
security, I'd like to see the program
brother.
implemented. Okay, 8.3, compliance with federal, state, and local requirements. So DMF is, mandating that growers attend, an annual, Vibrio control session. I actually went this morning to one just because it happened to be next spring.
Yeah, there's a Zoom next.
There's a Zoom one tomorrow if
Tomorrow.
anyone's interested.
Is it a one session?
Once a year, an annual, they do it annually, and harbor masters, or I'm sorry, like shellfish constable / harbor masters show up as well as growers.
Is Mike there?
He was not, no. But, the Duxbury, a lot of Duxbury folks were there. It's an hour and a half, so 90 minutes, and, it's a presentation plus a Q&A. And,
Is there a video?
is there a
My
video?
hands are in the video.
I don't know if there's a video. I
There
mean,
was a video, a training video.
Oh, there was, okay,
Yeah.
well, this year they're doing it, they're doing in-person ones. I think there's one in Eastham in a month, there was one in Duxbury today, there's one online tomorrow. They just wanna keep, it's informative as well as reminding on the icing protocols and anything that changed and things coming down the road as far as FDA, public health was there to answer questions. I don't think it's an hour and a half, and
What
you
if
can
we
do
do-
it online or you can do
What
it there.
is that just a naturally occurring
Came from the
virus?
West Coast, people believe.
Really?
Yeah,
And it's a bacteria
it's a bacteria.
It's bacteria.
that only grows in shellfish?
Yes, it doesn't harm the shellfish, but harms people.
Hmm.
And it's apparently like always present, but it only becomes like activated if the shellfish has been at a certain temperature for a certain period of time.
Yeah,
Scary.
Yeah,
yeah, it's scary, and then, there's a lot of reminders about, and
it's not usually
log
fatal
books,
unless, it's not
discussion.
usually fatal or serious unless you have an already compromised immune system, like you're going through chemotherapy, in which case you shouldn't be eating raw shellfish anyway.
That's true. Okay, so is there any,
No, it's good.
if anyone's interested,
DMF didn't want us to cite their chapter and verse or the CMR on this, or
no.
that's surprising. The code regulations.
I don't know that they've required it yet, but they're in the process of, because they didn't take attendance. There's no way they're required.
No, I meant they should say compliance with such laws and regulations, they say that we've got to comply with DMF, or our licensees have to comply with it, but they didn't ask for a citation of the actual code, that just.
No. Okay, extent of license rights, when used, the float shall be part of the licensee's license area and shall be considered off-site. They wanted us to delete that. Yeah, I mean. Okay, that might be, yeah, oh, here we go. Signage, another favorite topic, shall be visible at all times now, not just meanwhile.
So that's 8.8.
Yes, 8.8B.
So a buoy,
So a
with a
buoy.
sign on it.
A buoy with a sticker or something on it. We had talked about stickers at one point.
We'd have to define that, right, at some point before we recommend a selection.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking about, somebody brought up, we were sitting over there, the high flyer type of buoy at the corners of
Yeah.
the site.
Yeah.
Not as navigation, later it talks about something navigation. But we were getting away from the navigation markings.
Yeah, we're not gonna No. Okay, moving right along, marking and removal of equipment. Part C, when a license is terminated for any reason, the licensee shall remove all equipment from the license area within 30 days of the license termination. This is new. The town shall take possession and ownership of any market-sized product if not sold within 30 days of license revocation. Again,
Let it go.
yeah.
Throw me to the green grass.
Okay. And then the last one, landing, which I've gotta add a A, B, C, D, E for some reason there, the E got lost, but 8.9, top of page 15, 8.9, the new E. All shellfish harvested in Scituate waters shall be landed in Scituate Harbor or Cohasset Harbor. Again,
That's not on.
not landed. Oh, sorry, that's an addition as of today, sorry. I sent 2 copies. This is the one addition. That addresses the question of landing in Minot Beach parking lot, I guess.
Or Minot Beach or anything.
Or Minot Beach,
Or a
or private, or,
you could farm it, but you can't harvest.
right,
Maybe we should just see how challenging it is, land it.
We're gonna see. Or
Yeah,
something.
but I mean, before we say, this is what you have to do.
Well, Mike DeMayo was saying that in order to control it,
Oh, yeah,
Osterman,
Yeah.
you have to decide where they can come on board, because he can't be everywhere. Check it.
okay.
That's Kate Mosley.
Sorry, can you state your name and address for the record, Evan?
Lawrence Trowbridge, 392 Tilden Road.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a Mike, suggestion and also DMF, because recognizing that we have a part-time shellfish constable. It would reduce the workload. And again, tab record requirements, copies, they wanted us to add copies of all new, renewed, transferred licenses shall be sent to DMF along with public notice and minutes of the select board meeting at which the board voted on an action. So, again, something we would have done anyway. So this is regarding 10, liability of the town. If shellfish needs to be relocated, they shall be relocated at the expense of the licensee and subject to the issuance of a permit or other authorization. So sometimes they suggested authorization because if it would be a letter of authorization to move, it wouldn't be a permit. Again, not super substantive, just clarifying. And that's it. My only other edit would be whenever they're revised and adopted by select board. So, do you wanna make a motion to approve all the,
Motion to approve, accept
is
all.
that all at once? I think we can do that, because they're not super substantive.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Awesome, okay. Well, that's all the comments we have on the license, on the hearing, stop share so people can see. So that's all of the DMF comments that we have. I did, we're still on schedule for, we would then send these revisions to the select board and to town council for review, would be the next step, and they would review and approve these or send them back to us. And then DMF is still on schedule to do a site certification in early June. So they are still on schedule for that, not surprised, because they said late May, early June, and late May is a holiday, so I'm not surprised.
And then after that, I like to look at the end game here. Let's say we're mid-June and we have the DMF, do the site survey. What would our next steps be?
Our next steps would be sending it to the select board, saying this is our approved site. These are the people that are still interested. And they would hold a public hearing.
And is the select board asking us to, I would think they would be asking us to suggest the number and size of the proposed farms.
Yes. So I would think that's a great point. We would get the information back from BNF. We should meet and then discuss what our proposal, our advice, because we're advisory,
Right.
what our advice to the licensing authority would be.
Okay.
And then move forward in June. And they would have to advertise and hold a public hearing. And issue.
Besides this, some of the small little things is there anything else small floating out there that, again, I'm thinking about when it gets presented, selectmen questions that they could ask, that i's that have not been dotted and t's that have not been crossed, like the size of the buoys, we talk about buoys in here, but
Yeah,
we talk about size of buoys, but it's come up in recent meetings about helping preserve the flow of recreational traffic.
right.
I don't know if there's anything else that we should discuss.
Yeah, I think that's a good,
And get
that's
out of the
great,
way.
great point. I think that is also something we could give them a recommendation on. Based on the site, we look at what's approved and based on the number of people and recommend, and Mike could give his input on that as well.
Not big things, just
The
I wanna make sure
DMF
that,
may also have a little input too. in
and
what
other towns.
Yep.
I'm just thinking of all the things, again, once it gets presented to the select board, I don't want them to have to shove it back to us and say, nope, go figure that out.
Yeah,
We'd like to present it and say, this is the list,
We're all done.
everything is decided,
Yeah.
these are all our suggestions.
Can I make a comment?
yes, please, Paul.
I know we keep talking about the DMF going out to do the survey. Will we know when they're going? I've said it a couple of
Yes.
times because,
Yes,
obviously, we probably couldn't go with them legally or liability wise, but if we do get the date that they are going to be there, I would, it all, depending on schedules and whatnot, I wonder if some of us could go out
Yeah.
there with Mike DeMeo or something like that, just to be, I would just like to see the survey being done. It's just, I think it'd be
Yeah,
educational.
great comment and great point, Paula. We generally, like similar to water sampling, we take them. So they come down with all their gear, we get a boat, we take them.
Yep.
So, we will be taking them out, so we will know.
So as soon as we know the date, you should
As
at
soon
least
as we
tell
know the
committee.
date, I can post the date too, yeah.
I was thinking about the first time, right?
Yeah. I posted the date the first time we did it. Yep.
Okay.
Awesome.
So, and then we can meet, soon after that.
Okay,
Which
good.
Perfect.
It better be a nice day.
Well, it
80
has to,
degrees.
it can't be like, it can't be blowing, it can't be,
You're
it
diving,
can't be
yeah.
a snotty day. You know, they're like, they need somewhat calm because they're diving off the boat. So they're gonna have to plan a day that's not blowing really hard and the like boats up and down against the dive, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
I just have a comment.
Sure.
I hate to even bring it up.
You got
But I'm going to as usual, but I'm thinking, you know, I've talked to a lot of oyster farmers, and one thing is, a lot of them are saying that we shouldn't necessarily say like no floating cages, especially for like a pilot program. Maybe we should have some experiment, or even if we had like a, you know, I'm not sure, I mean, Jamie probably knows better, but, and then I start thinking, side note, we could mark the channels, say, or you know, you have a certain section allowed just for the floating, you know, so maybe you only do part of the grow out in the floating cages. But we might find ourselves in a position where they grow twice as fast in the floating cage, and maybe it's the only way for success in the area. So I don't know, you know, I'm not 100% sure how, or, you know, what and the fact that now we're doing it in deep water, it creates another challenge. So I mean, I just, everyone that I've talked to keeps telling me, you know, you really should, you know, you're not gonna be, you know, bottom planted. You really don't wanna close the door on the floating cage system. It might be the only way to get the, you know, the young ones to get hardy and, yeah, rough them up. And, you know, it might be the most efficient way. It's a good idea to try to, you know, test a couple ways. So I just wanted to bring that up. And I keep hearing about the channel, and I go, that would actually be a good way to mark the channel if, you know, depending on how the areas get split up, but maybe that area along the channel is where there's floating cages, I don't wanna
Yeah.
go backtracking.
I'll just say, I mean, I think the reason, and Susan, you guys have been doing this longer than I have. I think the reason that we said all submerged is, I think, a little bit as a, giving credit to the people that don't want anything.
Yeah, recreational.
You'd be twisting the knife
All,
pretty hard.
exactly,
if you were to put that thing.
right, so I'm not against it either, we want it to all succeed, right?
Yeah.
We would love it to succeed, so, if it succeeds this way, we don't know what you're saying is true or not,
Right,
right? We
yeah.
don't know the area, nobody knows the area, really.
Right.
So I think that was the reason why they, in the initial program,
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
hearing it,
In
and
the
I just
initial
like
program,
wondered,
it's all submerged.
I kept hearing people being like, oh.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
It is a good point, and we might wanna think about it in the future,
Right.
but.
And for other
I agree
areas
with
too.
the
Yeah.
initial.
And people do say that the floating gear is like the best method for growing oysters, like it's proving to be the best method, but.
Again, for those waters where it's rough a lot, it could, and that's a little open water there.
Yeah,
Who
when the
knows?
water's deep, it's,
Challenge.
yeah, it's gonna be a challenge, but there's gonna, you know, we'll see, there's a million ways to do it, I guess.
Yeah. I'm confident we'll overcome the challenge.
You know, those, and also the floating cages might be easier to, the fact that we have to have everything in for the winter, it might be easier to handle that way too.
For the future.
Yeah,
Good point.
I'm still holding out hope that we will prove that the intertidal space is not privately owned, and we'll be able to move into that area.
yeah.
Yep. I would second that. Okay.
Are we verging on wrapping up, because I didn't want to point something out?
Oh, yeah,
We're gonna walk on.
we're on to walk on,
Okay,
since we did shellfish recreational first, because there was no update. So,
I guess this would technically be a walk-on.
yeah, assuming it's about aquaculture.
It is, yeah. I just wanted to drag out into the light.
Parameters of
And because I didn't introduce myself the first time, Jamie Davenport, 16 Booth Hill Road, Scituate. I just wanted to drag out into the light, what seems to be Cohasset's current strategy for fighting aquaculture in outer Cohasset Harbor. They have just formed, it boggles my mind that there has never been a Cohasset Waterways Committee before, but they've just formed a
Harbor committee.
harbor, well, they had a harbor committee, but now it's the CWC or, it's a waterways committee as far as I know. And on this new committee, sit a couple of lawyers, I think someone who's tied with the Bassing Beach, group that's fighting aquaculture. And they have identified two acts. One is Act of 1912, defining the common borders, Bassing Beach, Breakwater, and Harbor, possible additional areas in between Scituate and Cohasset. That's where when the definitions were created 110 years ago. And then an Act of 1953, Chapter 54, which gives Cohasset enforcement power over Scituate waterways, outlined in that act. Examples like setting speed limits, stormwater regulations, moorings, and related fees. It seems as though they're trying to point to these acts, I guess they're like intramunicipal agreements, to try and say that it may be our waters or our land, but they have governance over those waters. And so I believe they have jurisdiction, which would actually give them the right to stop what we're doing, which is just completely ridiculous. But nonetheless, it seems to be a tack that they're taking. So I think we need to be very, very cognizant of what's going on over there, because I think that the select board has just recently been made aware of this, and they met 3 weeks ago about this. So it's it's going to gain traction. I don't want to muddy the waters, especially since we seem to be so close to, moving forward with this, taking the next steps with the Division of Marine Fisheries. So I just want to put that
I
out.
meant to be at that meeting and I wasn't, but the guy on you were there. and-
Dave, I'm actually just reading from Dave's and Costa's
Yeah, he
emails.
made some really good notes,
Yeah,
on it, and,
glad you
so our
caught that.
select board, he took good notes. And,
Yeah.
Our select board is now aware and
Yep.
will attend the next meeting.
Yeah.
They haven't even reached out to Scituate at all.
No.
And they won't until.
They have enough ammunition, yeah. I asked Jim Boudreau in 2017, almost 5 years ago, if he knew where the written agreement between Scituate and Cohasset that gave them the right to issue mooring licenses and retain the fees
He
and
just started.
And he said that at the time he'd been in office for a year. He said, I've been in office for a year, I've looked all over the place and I cannot find it. Well, it seems that they found it.
It's like 80 more.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
well,
things must have been a
there
lot
probably
different
were
back in
80
1912.
moorings in 1912.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Our select board is aware.
We'll
And
probably
we will-
read
we
through
will
all the
keep tabs on that
pages
as
that are
well.
there with the Places in the water.
Any other business walk-ons? No?
Yeah,
No, I don't see anybody.
is nobody even on there at all?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, Dave, yeah, there's a bunch of people.
Yeah, Potter, yeah. There's 1,
No other
2,
comments?
3, 4,
No
5,
interest?
6 people. I don't see any,
And that's it.
okay,
Good easy.
motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Time is it? 7:54.
Mm.
That must be
All
a
in
record.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Good job, Susan.
Thank you.
It's gotta be a record.
Under an hour.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Have